Hey everyone, welcome to another live stream. I'm glad you could be here. Today we have a super interesting topic. We're talking about a little bit of Texas versus Florida. And I'm not talking about college football or baseball or anything like that. We're talking real estate home prices. So as you know, each week I try to take a different news story, a different real estate update, and kind of analyze it, give you my opinions, what I agree with, what I disagree with. And today we're doing that. I saw a video, well, it started with an article that I found that basically said, home prices are being slashed in Texas and Florida. And this whole housing market crash is a narrative and a story that we've heard for a very long time now. And now we're starting to see, not really signs of that, but we're starting to see people kind of hone in on where they think a housing crash is going to happen. As always, I love to hear from you guys. So if you're watching the live stream, thanks for joining. I'd love to know where you are watching from, and drop a comment below. Let me know where you're tuning in from, what local market you're in. And I always love to know what you're seeing in your local real estate marketplace. So again, we're gonna be talking about we're gonna be talking about Texas and Florida today. Now, just as a disclaimer, I'm a California boy, born and raised in Southern California. So I am kind of a neutral third party on this. I don't have a horse in the race when it comes to Texas or California real estate. I'm not licensed in either of those places. I've never lived in either of those places. So if you are someone either from Florida or from Texas, let me know if you agree with what this article says, some of the stats that we're about to see, and one of the videos that we are about to watch. So let's get right into it. I have an article queued up here, and this one comes from fortune.com. And I'm gonna read the article, and then I got to do some explaining before we get into it. So a real estate CEO says pandemic boom towns in Florida and Texas are overvalued, and in some cases they're crashing. So a little doom and gloom here. So really interesting, real estate CEO, and we're going to get into this a little bit more. You're going to see this guy. His name is Nick Gurley or Gurley. I don't know exactly the proper way to pronounce it. Hopefully I'm not butchering it. But this guy is that they're talking about is the real estate CEO. He's a really popular YouTuber, and he blew up during the pandemic when real estate went crazy, like a lot of YouTube real estate people. He's just another pundit. And he is not a real estate agent. In fact, I read most today recently that he doesn't even own a home, which you don't have to own a home to know real estate. It's not a prerequisite or a requirement. But this guy is a professional YouTuber, and his channel is focused around selling an app for identifying distressed real estate. And his channel is primarily made up of, and if you can go look at it, I'm going to show you the channel here. You can go see it. You can go look at it. It's primarily, if not exclusively, related to the real estate crash, which he sees as imminent. And this is one of these gentlemen where he has said that there's going to be a real estate crash like every week for the last about 4 or 5 years. And it has yet to come to fruition. So as we go through this article and we go through the video clip that I'm going to show you, just keep that in mind. I'm also, there's also a little bit of evidence that actually refutes what he's saying. And we'll go over all this. So let's get right into the article. The allure of pandemic boom towns is either fading fast or simply a rebalance of sorts. These pandemic boom towns, they just got way too expensive over the last 2 or 3 years. Nicholas Gurley, chief executive of Reventure Consulting and Reventure App, said in an interview with CNBC on Monday. Reventure provides access to what it calls real-time housing data. And again, when this guy, Nicholas, when they say that he's the CEO of the chief executive of Reventure Consulting and Reventure App, that's like his own thing. That's like if I said I'm CEO of Joe Pareca Real Estate Enterprises, it's just a one-man show. So it takes a little bit of the flash out of it. But, the news is doing what the news does. So he continued, they're 20%, 30%, or maybe even 40% overvalued in some cases. And now that we're seeing the inventory levels spike and the number of price cuts on the market spike, that's the signal for you all out there that the market is shifting down, particularly in Texas and Florida. Those are two markets right now where we're seeing the biggest downturn. And as we get into it, I'll elaborate more on this, but I think, there's something to be said that his frame of thought is not incorrect. And the theory here is not a bad theory, but it's still just that, it's a theory. And whenever anybody says something is overvalued, right? Take that with a grain of salt. To go back, they're 20, 30, or maybe even 40% overvalued in some cases. Well, it's kind of interesting because what determines value, right? Value is what someone's willing to pay for a commodity, good, or asset. So if this gentleman thinks that these homes are overvalued by 40%, that doesn't mean they actually are overvalued by 40%. There's no statistic out there that I'm aware of, and if it is out there, I'd love to see it. But there's no statistic out there that is a measure or metric of any asset or commodity being overvalued. Because again, it all comes down to who's willing to pay that price. So whenever you get anybody that says, oh, this thing is overvalued or the price is super inflated, just because it seems overvalued to you doesn't mean that it actually is overvalued. So keep that in mind. Let's continue. It's no secret that a lot of Californians became Texans and Floridians during the pandemic. It was the newfound ability to work from anywhere, a need for space, and ultra low mortgage rates that set off the pandemic-fueled housing boom. Home prices rose substantially in only a few years, and some metropolitan areas are seeing that come to an end. Now, this I do agree with. We did have a lot of Californians move to Texas and Florida. Now, I will say that as of right now, the most common place for people in Texas to move to is California. So we're seeing a little bit of a reversing trend on that. But that remains true that, during that pandemic time, there were a lot of Californians going to Texas and to Florida. What I will say is that, this idea that, Californians are fleeing and the state and they're fleeing to places like Texas and Florida and whatnot, that's not the case. If you look up the numbers, the numbers are high, but in comparison to the overall population of California, it's not noticeable. I don't want to say it's irrelevant, but it's a fraction of 1%. I think last I read, there was something between 50 and 55,000 people in the last year moved from California to Texas. Not an insignificant amount, but if you think of the size, both in population and physical size of both states, California and Texas, that's not making an appreciable difference, in my opinion, on what either state is feeling. So this idea that Californians are fleeing, I think that's a little bit of a pipe dream. But no doubt there was some migration that took place. As Fortune previously reported, an analysis from Redfin published earlier this month found home prices are falling in 4 major metropolitan areas across the country from a year earlier as demand dampens, and 3 are in Texas. Meanwhile, a separate Redfin analysis also from this month said housing markets in Western Florida are cooling faster than anywhere else in the country as natural disasters intensify, new construction soars, and the pandemic-era home buying demand boom fades further into the rearview mirror. Of the 10 housing markets listed as cooling the fastest, 6 were in Florida and 2 were in Texas. I was actually one of those people who moved to Austin, Gurley said, mind you, to rent. I saw it firsthand. Prices there went up 50%, 60% in 2 or 3 years, and now they're almost down 20% already. I mean, Austin is a market that's legitimately crashing. That's not an exaggeration. Prices are down almost 20% there, and they're going to continue to go down due to those skyrocketing inventory levels. Now, there is some truth to this in terms of if inventory levels do go up, typically prices will come down. And again, it's a very, very basic supply and demand issue. We've talked about this before on the channel and in my live streams that it really is basic supply and demand. There's a lot of people and we don't have a lot of houses for those people. And the houses that we do have are being purchased not only by end consumers, buyers that are going to live in the home, your first time buyer, your regular family that's going to go live in the home, but they're also facing competition from corporate investors. And we don't have to go into all that because we're all familiar with BlackRock and all that good stuff. So there is some truth to that. However, some of the stuff that we'll see refutes this to a certain extent. There is more inventory in Austin and prices are down considerably from their peak, but the metropolitan area's home prices are still much higher than they were before the pandemic. And given that we're missing millions of homes, an increase in supply might not be the worst thing, which is true. And it's funny because this is always the argument. So you have the argument of we don't have enough homes, so home prices are really, really high. We need those home. We want those home prices to come down so they're more affordable. And then the moment inventory ticks up just a little bit anywhere, it's, oh my God, there's a crash. There's going to be a crash. Inventory's ticking up. Look, homes are sitting on the market longer. Well, yeah, they're sitting on the market for 14 days instead of 6 days. And inventory, ticked up from 1,000 units to 1,200 units. Is that a crash? No, absolutely not. And some of those could just be seasonality changes as well. So I'm glad that the article kind of pointed this out, saying that even if inventory does go up, we're still missing millions and millions of homes and home units. And it's a good thing if we get a little bit more inventory. That's not a bad thing. That will alleviate some of the stress on the market. And that stress is really being felt mostly, if not exclusively, by buyers, because as we've all known for the past few years, sellers have really kind of had their way with home selling. Austin is definitely one of the most widely discussed markets in our current housing cycle for becoming one of the hottest before falling from grace. But consider this. A major problem with California is that it doesn't build enough homes, and its policy failures led to the state's housing crisis. Texas is the opposite. It built more homes than any other state last year, and its top 3 markets by housing starts built 300% more homes than California's, as Fortune previously reported. So something to consider there, that Texas has certainly done a better job than California when it comes to building new property. It could be a myriad of reasons. It could be because cost of labor is cheaper. Cost of land certainly is probably cheaper in Texas as opposed to California. Perhaps the building and permitting process has a little bit less red tape here in California. In order to build new housing, it's a literal fight sometimes because there's a lot of people that don't want their neighborhood to change or modify or evolve, which leads to obviously housing being harder to build, and then that lower inventory issue that we've been talking about. I saw it in so many different cities in this housing cycle: Austin, Phoenix, Boise, Tampa, Jacksonville. A lot of these markets, people said it would never go down. And this talking about the CEO of this reventure, this YouTube crash bro. I call them crash bros. In the industry, we call them crash bros. They're guys that just, the only thing the market ever does is crash constantly all the time, which is just not true. As we speak, it's starting to go down. And the telltale sign is those inventory figures. Again, this guy is taking, a small blip of inventory and equating that to a very large macroeconomic situation. I don't think that's a fair comparison or critique, but we're all entitled to our own opinions. Gurley continued, we have lots of investors selling. We have a huge home builder permitting pipeline that's still getting delivered over the next year. And in addition, particularly in Florida, we're seeing a lot of regular homeowners being forced to sell their homes because of skyrocketing insurance and HOA fees. Now, this is not necessarily something I disagree with Mr. Gurley in this portion. His last sentence about skyrocketing insurance and HOA fees, especially in Florida, is true. Insurance has been an issue all over the nation. I'm in California. Again, for those that haven't watched before, I'm about 40 miles east of about 30 miles east of Los Angeles in a town called Claremont. And it's absolutely true. Even in my area, home insurance has been a little bit more difficult to come by, especially if you're in an area that is exposed to natural hazard. Now, we don't have a whole lot of those in California because our weather's really great, but we do have wildfires. So we're seeing homes that are in hillside areas, homes that have wild lands behind them or large open spaces behind them or next to them. It can be difficult for them to get homeowners insurance. Florida's the same way, given the floods, potential storms, hurricanes, things like that. So he's got a point here. And Florida is land of the HOA, and HOAs, if insurance goes up and the HOA provides insurance to the people that live in that HOA community, well, then the insurance costs are going to go up, right? So they're feeling the effects of that as well. So I don't necessarily disagree with Mr. Gurley with that statement, but I disagree with just about everything else he's saying, and I'll elaborate more in just a little bit. In each metropolitan area Gurley mentioned above, home prices have fallen from peaks reached during the pandemic, but apart from Austin, values are up from a year earlier per Zillow. So Austin is the only outlier. Gurley has been sounding the alarm on home prices for some time. In December 2022, in a video, he forecasted a substantial decline in home values, saying we're firmly in an era where home prices are going down in America, but national home prices are up. So I'm glad there is a little bit of journalistic integrity here in this Fortune article, essentially calling out this so-called expert by saying, oh, back in 2022, he said that we are screwed and home prices are going to fall. And here we are 2.5 years later, and home prices are as high as they have ever been. So that's the first article I wanted to run through with you guys. One thing I wanted to point out before we move on from this article and go to the next is that in this whole article, whenever Mr. Gurley makes a statement or is quoted, you'll notice that there's no data to support it. He doesn't quote any statistics, any research, any figures, any numbers. All the numbers that he's saying, oh, I saw firsthand prices that went up 50 to 60% in 2 or 3 years, and now they're almost down 20%. So he's giving us some numbers there, but at the same time, he's saying, well, my firsthand experience is that I saw this. Okay, well, we can all say that we saw things, or we can all say that we experienced things, but it doesn't mean that actually happened or that that's actually truth. So it would have been nice if he had some type of link or source that went to something like, oh, according to Fred Center of Economic Data, which is a very reliable federally backed statistical website for all sorts of economic data, housing included, or Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, which again, another federal site that deals with loans. Heck, even quote Redfin. They do a lot of great statistics regarding housing. And he didn't say, well, according to Redfin 2 years ago, home prices were 50% higher and now they're down 20%. And here's a link to that, or show a chart or a graph. No, this is everything in this article is stuff that he goes, well, I've seen, or I feel, or I experienced, or I think. And those types of statements don't work well when we're talking about statistics and business and a financial market such as housing. So I want to leave you with that before we move on to the next thing. So the next article, I have 2 more articles, one specific to the Austin housing market and one specific to the Florida housing market. We're going to go into that, and then I've got a video clip. As always, thanks for joining the live stream. Drop a comment below. Let me know where you're watching from. I would love if someone in the chat is from either Austin, Texas, or somewhere in Florida, or anywhere in Texas, because I would love to know what you think and what you're experiencing and what you're seeing, because I am, again, just a California guy commenting on what I have seen in the news. So let's go over to this. Give me one moment. Oh, I see I'm having a little bit of a camera issue. Let's see if we can fix that really quick. There we go. Just like that. Nothing ever happened. Okay, so I want to share this tab with you. The article of this, the formatting of this article is a little bit funky because there was a lot of ads. Newsweek.com has a ton of ads. So I used a little workaround for that, and the article is a little funky now. So you're gonna see a lot of blank space. So this article is fairly recent, June 26, 2024. So today, 6:49 a.m. this was released, and it was updated about an hour later. So the former pandemic boomtown of Austin, Texas is still seeing sellers slashing the asking price on their homes by as much as 30%, with the city yet to fully recover from the aggressive blow it was dealt in recent years. A newly built 3-bedroom, 3-bathroom, single-family home in New York Avenue, Austin was listed for sale on Zillow on Monday, June 24th for $899, over $400,000 less than it was sold for in August of 2023. The house, which has a total interior livable area of 1,494 square feet, was built last year. So a newer built home is on the market for $899, which is over $400,000 less. So it was probably listed at 1.3 and now it's at 899. And that, there you have it. That's a lot of money for 1,500 square feet. It's a ridiculous amount of money for 1,500 square feet. And the listing description said the property has been priced to sell, adding that there are new projects in the pipeline. And investors say, sell it. According to the sellers, the property is the best value in East Austin for this price. There's a pretty picture of the Austin city skyline. The staggering price cut on the New York Avenue property shows that the frenzied days of home buying in Austin are definitely over, and sellers now have to meet reluctant buyers halfway. The Austin housing market was one of the hottest in the nation during the pandemic years, with growing demand leading to skyrocketing prices. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger for you guys so you can see a little bit easier. There we go. Now, this is this is just, one example. This is just one case, one house that supposedly was sold for very high, and now it's being sold for a lot less. It does make a great headline and a great article, but that's one house in one city, in one state, in one country. So tough to draw a national conclusion about what the housing market's going to do. But certainly, if this is a trend, that is a little bit alarming if you are an Austin homeowner. But it really only matters if you're looking to sell a property. If you're happy living there, then it doesn't really matter what the property is worth. Between 2020 and 2022, what we call the unicorn years in housing because of the pandemic, the Texas city was considered a seller's market, with buyers fighting over a limited supply of properties and engaging in bidding wars that usually ended with one party offering a sum often way above asking price, which is similar to what we saw in a lot of major areas in that pandemic unicorn years. So that wasn't unique to Austin. In May 2022, the median list price of a home in Austin reached a peak of $539,900. According to Moody's Analytics, homes in the Texas city were overvalued by 63.7% in the first quarter of 2022. I would love to know what I'm going to have to look into that because I'm really curious about that. Moody's Analytics is a pretty good statistical site with good information. I would love to know what their metric and how they came up with overvalued and how they came up with that number. So that's something certainly that I'm going to look into because I'm curious about that. But the situation has changed drastically since then, driven by a drop in the number of remote workers flocking into the city from other states. Accordingly, sellers have had to adapt. And again, this is true. And I don't think this was a surprise to a lot of people in the real estate industry. I think it may have come as a surprise to just the average consumer, but there were a lot of people that flocked to places like Austin and Florida and Nashville, and Boise during the pandemic because, well, they could get a lot of house for their money. It's a relatively desirable place to live, but the biggest thing was remote work. A lot of people were remote work, and why live in my expensive LA condo when I could go buy a ranch in Texas or, a beautiful new build in Boise, when I don't, when I could do that for much less than what I would need to do that, in California or New York or Seattle or whatever major metropolitan area you were in. So I don't think it's a huge surprise that as now, mid 2024, it's crazy to think that, it's been 4 years since the pandemic really kind of took off and started. And it's been about a year and a half, 2 years since it's been sort of over. It's not a surprise to a lot of people in the real estate industry that some of these pandemic boom towns, which I think is an appropriate word for them, are starting to show signs that, their prices are falling and the market is softening in those areas because there's not as many people coming to them anymore. And if anything, there's probably more people leaving than coming now. Following the so-called correction of the U.S. housing market between late summer of 2022 and spring of 2023, Austin saw the steepest home price drops in the country. Between July 2022 and April 2023, home prices in the city fell by 10.2%. According to the Zillow Home Value Index, while the national decline was only 1% during that same time frame. So nationally, home prices declining 1%. But in Austin, declining 10.2%. So 10 times the amount of the national average, which is quite a bit. Redfin chief economist Daryl Fairweather previously told Newsweek that because home prices have been so high, there's a lot of room for prices to fall as mortgage rates surged and migration to the city declined. The addition of newly built homes also contributed to the cooling Austin market. Contributing to the cooling the Austin market down, as Texas currently tops the list of states that have started and completed the most construction process in recent years, alongside Florida. A single-family home on 403 Middle Lane, Austin, listed for sale on Zillow, has seen price cuts of around 23% since it was first put on the market in March. Over 3 months ago, the property, a 3-bedroom, 2-bath property with a total interior livable area of 1,480 square feet, was listed for $349,900, which comparatively where I live and my market is a freaking steal. On Wednesday, the price was cut to $269,900. That's crazy. It was the 4th price cut since March, and the property remains unsold. An apartment on 1840 Burton Drive in Austin, listed for sale on Zillow, has seen 7 price cuts since it was put on the market on April 19th for $199,000. The property near downtown Austin is now selling for $159,900, about 20% less. The apartment has 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, and a total interior livable area of 518 square feet. According to the latest data on Zillow, the average Austin home value was $548,654 by the end of May, down 4.1% compared to a year earlier. So certainly by these metrics, Austin is certainly feeling the heat. Again, if you're familiar with the Austin market, drop a comment. I'd love to know what you're seeing if you are a local or have experience with it. But home prices are clawing back, especially as some neighborhoods remain more attractive than others. Redfin reported that the median sale price of a home in Austin has been climbing back and was $587,250 in May, up 3.9% year over year. According to the real estate brokerage, the median sale price in the city has been growing steadily since March. So interesting. So Austin kind of faced a little bit of an issue, a little bit of a setback, a little bit of a stumble in pricing. But according to Redfin, which again, Redfin is a major real estate brokerage, but I will say that their data and their data analysis is pretty dang good. They have some good metrics. They basically just present the numbers and the graphs and the data. So not a whole lot to sway one way or the other or influence. Just kind of the data is what it is. So we're going to go over and we're going to look at the now the article regarding Florida house prices slashed by nearly 25% of sellers. Amid an ongoing insurance crisis and lingering high mortgage rates, Florida homeowners are slashing prices to make their properties more appealing, with nearly 25% currently selling for less than they originally asked for. As of early Monday, Florida had a total of 202,463 properties, including houses, condos, single-family and multifamily homes, townhomes, and lots listed by agents on Zillow, and 8,654 listed by owners and others. So 202,000 listings by real estate agents and companies, and another 8,600 listed by owners or other entities. Among all properties listed by agents, 47,000 appeared in the price reduction category, while among those listed by owners, the number went down to 1,100 for a total of 48,502. The numbers were noticed by vacation rental investor Rohin Dar, who first posted them on social media and compared the rate of properties sold at price reduction in Florida with those in Texas and California. So let's see. Texas has 173,000 homes for sale, 16.7% with a price cut. Florida had 202,000 homes for sale and 24% with a price cut. Interesting. As of early Monday, Texas had a total of 176,000, almost 177,000 properties listed by agents on Zillow and 9,800 by owners. Of the properties listed by agents, 28,000 had a price reduction, while a little over 1,000 of those listed by owners and others were going for a lower price. In California, there were a total of 73,000 properties listed by agents, just under 4,000 listed by owners. Of the first 9,554 had a price reduction. Among the second, the number was only 310. So interesting to note here, the amount of properties available in Texas this is just listed by agents. This isn't even all of them. It really, if you want all of them, it's this large number plus this much smaller number. So was that probably 189, 190,000 properties for sale in Texas, with just about 78,000 properties listed in California. So yikes, California is still feeling the heat when it comes to inventory. And this could be a really good example in the data, right? You have to read the data. The data here is alluding to the fact that it is true. Texas was much better at building more housing units, hence their higher inventory, hence their softening prices, where in California, we haven't been building as much, and therefore there's just less properties available. The percentage of properties with a price reduction in Texas and California, respectively about 16.7 and 13.5%, was lower than those in Florida, which were about 24.3% of all properties. So California leading the way in reduced prices of their real estate. Lawrence Yoon, chief economist and senior vice president of research at the National Association of Realtors, previously told Newsweek that Florida homeowners' willingness to sell, even at a lower price, might be due to the home appreciation the state has seen since the pandemic. And this is kind of interesting. I'm going to read the next article and I'm going to elaborate a little bit, or the next paragraph, and then I'm going to elaborate. Florida had the highest home price appreciation over the past 3 years, and some people may be cashing out, Yoon said, adding that the higher insurance premiums in the state might also be playing a role. And this is these two sentences here. It's interesting because there's a good point that gets brought up. Yes, these homeowners might be slashing their prices, and yes, the home values might be decreasing, but they went up so quickly and so fast that these people are still making a ton of money. They still have a ton of equity. If home prices go up 30, 40, 50%, and someone goes to sell their property and then cuts the price 10 or 20%, well, they're still doing pretty dang good. And also, it would be a little bit foolish to think that home prices were going to continue to climb at the rate at which they did during the pandemic, with ultra low interest rates and a ton of buyer motivation to purchase a home. Home prices do typically go up over time. I can pull up the graph that shows home prices charted as early, I think it's about 1930 or so, all the way to the current day. And they've only had a zero increase or a decrease a handful of times in, well, what's close to 100 years. So although it's normal for home prices to increase, it would be foolish to think that they would continue to increase at the rate that they were in the unicorn years. So it makes a little bit of sense that people are having to cut their prices a little bit in order to sell, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a crash. It doesn't mean that people are losing money. It just means that people aren't making as much money as they could have a year ago if they sold. Property insurance readjustments, like any other added cost of ownership, will induce some additional sellers. He said some retired homeowners on a fixed income could be forced to sell. This right here is also really, really important. This is something that we've talked about before with states that have aggressive property tax laws. And this is one thing that California got right. The California government actually got right. We have a law on the books where property taxes can only increase about 2% per year. And that's really it. But other places are not like that. In fact, the two areas that we're talking about, Texas and Florida, are notorious for having properties reassessed at what they call market value. And if the market goes up 40 or 50%, guess what happens to your property taxes? They go up too. Now, imagine you're a senior citizen on a fixed income and you've been used to your property taxes for the last 15, 20, 25 years. And all of a sudden, your property tax increases by 30, 40, or 50%. That's going to be a problem for you. And if that property tax is too expensive and you cannot pay it, well, then your only option really is to sell the home. Home insurance in Florida was among the highest in the country after having increased by 102% in the past 3 years, according to data from the Insurance Information Institute. Florida Realtors chief economist Brad O'Connor previously told Newsweek that an increase in the number of sellers might be linked to the fact that many homeowners who had been avoiding moving from their properties to dodge higher mortgages now believe rates won't go further up. I think people are now more comfortable with the fact that interest rates are up here to stay, O'Connor said. I think initially when rates rose quickly, people were uncertain as to where they would go from there. But now we're pretty much in a situation where I think everyone is comfortable with the idea that rates are probably going to stay about where they're at, or they're going to decline somewhat in the next year or two. And this is the case. This is not something new to people in the real estate industry, especially mortgage lenders. It does take a certain amount of time for consumers to accept an increase in interest rates. And usually that time span is 9 to 16 months or so. And we've had our high rates, which they're not high, they're just higher than what we've been accustomed to in the last decade or so. But now consumers are used to the fact that, interest rates are up in the 7% range. They're probably not going to go up much higher. They're probably not going to come down much lower. We are getting some encouraging news with economic data that mostly related to inflation. And it does seem like we're going to see a rate reduction here probably in September, or at least one before the year ends. But even then, it's probably not going to be substantial, not going to make a huge difference. And I think that Mr. O'Connor here is correct in saying that, consumers are just kind of getting used to it. So now I want to share some more data with you guys. Oops, I did the wrong thing. Let me reshare my screen. This is what we want. There we go. So this is in Austin, Texas. This is according to Rocket Homes. Rocket Homes, of course, is a pretty big outlet. They're the same as Rocket Mortgage. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so you can see. So right now, market conditions, housing market conditions, it's a little bit of a neutral market, but the needle is just tipping towards a buyer's market, which again is not necessarily a bad thing. And just because it's a buyer's market doesn't mean things are crashing. It doesn't mean that property values are plummeting. It doesn't mean any of that. It just means that buyers have a little bit more leverage, negotiation power, and just quite frankly have an easier time buying a home. So median sold price in Austin, Texas, $568,618, about $310 a square foot. Different since May. So it's down 2.1% since May. Median sold price by bedroom count, as we can see, all kind of down except for the large homes, they're up a little bit. Interesting, 5-bedroom homes, luxury homes, 1.1 million price point has actually gone up 7.4%. It's kind of interesting. So nearby cities, Austin's down 2.1%. Westlake Hills, this must be a luxury neighborhood. This is not a fair comparison. We're looking at one neighborhood that's got a 580 average, and the other one is a 2.7 million average. Of course, that drops down to 2.1. It looks like a huge decrease. That's not a very, very good comparison there. But the interesting part is this is year over year, from June 2023 until May 2024. We've only seen -2%. In 6 months, it's 0%. I mean, month over month. So this idea that home prices are being slashed and they're selling for much less, while there might be a couple instances of those types of things happening, the data doesn't back it up. Now, I will say that this is only through May of 2024. Housing data is notoriously slow. It lags. It's usually at least 1 month behind, but more on average, it's about 2 to 3 months behind. So I will say with the caveat that it will be interesting to see what happens as more data comes out, because it certainly could change. Here's an interesting one. Housing supply in Austin. How many homes are available in Austin, Texas? Well, the number of homes available for sale in April of 2024 was 5,585. Just 1 month later in May, we see 6,415 for an almost 15% increase in homes available. And here we're seeing the breakdown. So your smaller, 1-bedroom properties, 26% increase. Your 2 and 3 bedrooms, actually, and the rest are all pretty close, between a 13 and a 16% increase there. Number of homes sold. And this is kind of the interesting thing. Asking price versus sold price. So 585 homes, or 63%, were actually sold under the asking price in Austin, Texas. 169 homes were sold at asking, but still 180 homes were sold over the asking price. So this is kind of a really interesting breakdown. And this right here, this one graph is a good reason and a good summation of why we're seeing that needle up top lean a little bit more towards the buyer-friendly market. And that's because of this grouping right here, 63%, 585 homes sold under asking price. Now, we don't know how far under asking price that is, but usually when a home sells under asking price, that is an indicator that that the property sat on the market for a little bit longer and that buyers faced less competition, because if there's less competition, it gives buyers the ability to make a lower offer. But that's not always the case, because if the property is overpriced to begin with, you still might get 3 or 4 or 5 offers. But if that property is priced at $500,000, you might get 3 or 4 or 5 offers that are at, 460, 465, 470, 468. And that home could still sell for under asking price, even though there was good competition on the home. But this is really interesting. If you're buying a home in Austin, you may be able to get a good deal. 62.6% of homes were sold below asking price last month. This will be super interesting to see how this metric changes and evolves as we get more data, especially since we're in the prime portion of the selling season, at least here in California. Most of the selling action takes place between about mid-April and early August. That's the key time, with really the peak being like May, June, July. We're like right in the thick of the season right now. So it'll be interesting to see what happens as we get more data, because again, this is only up to May, because housing data does lag. Days on market. So in May, 41 days on market. In May 2023, 41 days on market. May 2024, 42 days on market. So really not that big of a deal. 588 homes were sold under 30 days. So property's still moving very, very quickly in Austin. So, okay. So last thing I want to share with you guys is this video from CNBC. And this has the CEO of Reventure app, or whatever the heck, Nick Gurley, he's on here. And in the beginning, they flash it in a chart, which is really interesting because it kind of contradicts what their guest says. But anyways, let's just get into it.
All right, if you are looking to buy or sell a home, listen up, because some cracks are beginning to emerge in the housing market. Take Austin, Texas, as an example. Austin, once one of the hottest real estate markets in America. But according to data from Reventure, housing inventory in the city.
So according to data from the person that they're getting the interview with, it's according to him. Very interesting. This data really should be taken from some third party source. I mean, it's, you're having your guest on the show and then them providing the data, not really, not the best protocol.
Has hit the highest level on record. It's a similar story in parts of Florida. For example, housing inventory in Jacksonville surging more than 3.
So we'll use this graph. It's very, very similar to the Austin graph. And they say, the inventory is up. It is up. It's much higher. Well, yeah, you're right. Inventory is up. Look, it's up. Well, it's up if you compare it to this. It's up if you compare it to the middle of the pandemic, where we had almost no inventory, stuff was shut down, people weren't moving, and certainly weren't selling their homes, which led to an increase in sales prices and the boom in real estate pricing. So this idea that inventory has shot up and we're going to see cracks emerge in the housing market and prices are going to drop. Well, if you just look to the left of the graph, 2017, 2018, 2019, this level is actually still appears to be slightly below, if not at the same level as inventory before the pandemic. So yes, home inventory has increased, but it hasn't increased at a level that's been any higher than what we've seen in the very recent history. This isn't like 2008 where, we saw inventory levels double or triple or quadruple what things were in the previous year. In fact, this is what we need. We need more inventory. We need more homes for people to buy, because that's how the pricing situation will be alleviated. So I don't necessarily think that this is an indicator that we're seeing a housing crash or prices softening. Will they soften because there's a little bit more supply? Yes. but they're not softening so much to where we're starting to see a crash or a major decrease in home values that are going to be a problem for people. And again, this was the same. If we go back just a few seconds to the Austin, there's the Austin graph, same thing. Now, this one is I will say this one's a little bit higher. If you draw the line roughly straight across, this is a little bit higher, but that's because Austin was a really interesting place. That was a really big boom town from the pandemic. Austin is a little bit of a liberal pocket in a conservative area. I think it attracted a lot of tech workers. It still is a tech heavy area. It attracted a lot of people from Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Jose, Seattle, and pulled them to Austin. So I do think that the effects there are going to be magnified a little bit more. And yeah, there is more inventory than there was previously, but look at the scale. We're talking between 6,000 and 12,000. So 9.9 thousand units of availability in housing inventory. Whereas, well, this was probably around 6.5 to 7,000. So again, not a really huge increase, although it is an increase. And the news and this Nick Gurley guy making this out to be some huge thing, I think it's a little blown out of proportion. And I don't necessarily think it indicates what he says that it's going to indicate. Let's continue.
Jacksonville surging more than 300% over the past 3 years, arguably off a very low base.
Exactly. And he just said it right there. It like he slipped that in, up 300% off of a very low base. That's like saying, I have $1 and now I've got $2. I doubled my net worth. I must be so wealthy. Well, no, you just went from $1 to $2. That's hardly a noticeable increase. So again, it's just interesting how this is framed. He even alludes to it here that arguably they started really low. So yeah, 300% increase when you're scraping the bottom of the barrel is not a whole lot. But again, it's the news doing what the news does.
But are these just isolated instances based on things like a lot of investors buying to rent or rent out an Airbnb on the homes? Or are we beginning to see a concerning trend developing in real estate? Let's talk about it with Reventure app CEO Nick Gurley. Nick, it's a good question. Is this like a more macro, oh gosh, I better sell now? Or as we've read, a lot of these people bought Airbnbs or whatever, hoping to get rich, and it hasn't.
I don't think anybody buys an Airbnb hoping to get rich. Obviously, I think people buy Airbnbs because they feel like it's an investment. But you also have to look at what's the percentage of homes in the United States that are operated as Airbnbs. Certainly the number has gone up, but does it make any type of real difference in our inventory? And again, same with corporate investors. Yes, they are causing a problem, but still the vast majority of homes are owned by regular consumers that choose to live in them.
It worked out.
Great question. I mean, the Airbnb crash is certainly something that's playing into the rising inventory that we are seeing in Texas and Florida. But I think this is a broader macro trend. These pandemic boom towns, they just got way too expensive over the last 2 or 3 years. They're 20, 30, maybe even 40% overvalued in some cases. And now that we're seeing the inventory levels spike and the number of price cuts on the market spike, that's the signal for you all out there that the market is shifting down.
So far, I don't disagree with him. Yes, the market probably is shifting down, but the question is how much? How much is it shifting down? Is it shifting down in a way that is to cause alarm and concern? I don't think so. And again, this is what we hear a lot. Prices are so high, it's so unaffordable. We must have more housing units. We must create more housing units. We must alleviate this problem. We must have more affordable housing. Okay, so a city like or a state like Texas builds more houses than California by a long shot. Now all of a sudden inventory is high and there's a huge problem. You can't have it both ways.
Particularly in Texas and Florida, those are the two markets right now where we're seeing the biggest downturn, as well as some states like Tennessee and Arizona.
Well, this is TV hyperbole, of course, Nick, because that's what I do. Austin's real estate market was like the NVIDIA of home ownership, right? I mean, it just went parabolic during the pandemic. People moved there because you could live. You could like go to dinner when you couldn't in other places. So the housing market went insane. And people, again, it was like, well, it'll never go down. It'll never. Whenever I hear the words never, ever, forever. It doesn't matter what the asset class is. That's when I get nervous.
Okay. So I wasn't going to pull this up, but I'm going to. And I do agree with this gentleman that it's true. You should never use definitive words like never, ever, always, forever, all that good stuff when it comes to, you know, asset classes and commodities. But real estate and home prices are a little bit different. Let me show you. I hope that I can get the correct image that I want here. Bear with me just 1 second. I wasn't prepared to show this. Let's see if we can find it really quick. Okay. Let's see. Just want to make sure. Okay. I'll make this a little bit bigger for you guys. The U.S. Housing Pricing Index since 1900. All right. So what's the overarching theme of this graph? Anybody in chat, chime in. What do you notice? Well, if I were to draw an arrow, which way would it go? It would go this way. Now, yes, we do have a dip here. Absolutely. This is the great financial crash, the great meltdown. And if you notice, you know, the trends have been very high, but we're not talking about even the last 20 years. We're talking about overall as an average. And overall as an average, housing continues to go up. Will it go up forever? I don't know. I mean, if you stop this graph in 2010, you said, oh, will it go forever? Obviously it didn't. But this idea that, and again, I don't disagree with the news anchor saying, you know, oh, nothing always goes up forever. The housing market fluctuates, but anybody that's been around any financial market will tell you that real estate is historically extremely solid and very, very predictable. So again, not to get off track, but this guy's idea that, you know, people said that housing always goes up, it never goes down. That's a red flag. Well, not necessarily, because it does actually typically trend in an upward direction. And even when we had the great financial crash, there was a reset, but already by the mid 20 teens, so around 2015, 2016, we were already back up to where we were at that time. So don't necessarily agree with him on that.
100%. Brian, I believe the word is this time is different is what people say. And I was actually one of those people who moved to Austin in 2020 and 2021. So I saw it firsthand. Prices there went up 50, 60% in 2 or 3 years. And now they're almost down 20.
So this time is a little bit different though. I mean, if you're just looking factually, the previous time in 2008, which, you know, when he says this time is different, I'm assuming he's alluding to the run up in prices in 2008. It was a completely different scenario, completely different scenario. This has been talked about a lot. I've talked about this. I've got a video on my channel about this. This market is nothing like 2008. The only relation that it has is that home prices went up very quickly. But that's about it. 2008 was about subprime loans, fake loans. It was about people who were getting stated income loans, ninja loans, no income, no assets, no job. And that's not what we have here. Now we're having a run up in housing prices, mostly due to a supply and demand issue. Now, why do we have that supply and demand issue? Well, that's up for debate. A lot of people say that it's corporate investors. They're not helping, certainly. A lot of people think that it's because we haven't built houses. I think that's probably the best and most truest one. Other people blame immigration. I don't know. But certainly it actually is fundamentally different. So when he says, oh, it's different than the last time, and kind of jokes that people are saying that as an excuse, well, but it actually is different. It actually is different. Now, will it turn out the same? Will it turn out differently? Nobody knows. Nick doesn't know. This CNBC anchor doesn't know. I don't know. You don't know. We're just going to have to watch.
Percent already. I mean, Austin is a market that's legitimately crashing. That's not an exaggeration.
It is an exaggeration, though, because it's not crashing. A price reduction is not the same as a housing market crash. Just because sellers are not able to get as much as they could have got for their property a year ago does not mean it's a crash, because at the end of the day, they're still selling for a very good price in comparison to not only what they bought it to, but what they owe on the property. So is it a crash? Absolutely not. A crash would have to, a crash would be if an entire market, their values and prices went down so far that we start to see mass foreclosure, mass sell-off, people having to bring money to sellers, having to bring money to the closing table because they owe more than what the property is worth. People simply leaving their keys to the bank because they can no longer afford the mortgage payment, thus flooding the market with inventory and significantly lowering prices. But that's not the case. Just because there's a small, and again, the anchor prefaced this. The anchor said himself, there's been a 300% increase, albeit off of a very low starting point. That doesn't constitute a crash. This is just fundamentally wrong.
Prices are down almost 20% there, and they're going to continue to go down due to those skyrocketing inventory levels. And you're right, you have to be very
skyrocketing. They're up 2,500 to 3,000 units over their pre-pandemic levels. I don't know if I consider that skyrocketing. And again, isn't this what buyers are begging for? Isn't this what we need in the real estate market? Don't we need more inventory? Isn't that the whole idea? Create more inventory so home prices become more stable and affordable. Which is it? Is the housing market crashing and we're all doomed? Or is there not enough homes to go around and prices are skyrocketing? It can't be both.
Skeptical anytime someone tries to tell you that a market will never go down, because I saw it in so many different cities in this housing cycle: Austin, Phoenix, Boise, Idaho, Tampa, Jacksonville.
Here
in a lot of these markets, people said it would never go down, but as we speak, it's starting to go down. And the telltale sign is those inventory figures. We have lots of investors selling. We have a huge home builder permitting pipeline that's still getting delivered over the next year. And in addition, particularly in Florida, we're seeing a lot of regular homeowners being forced to sell their homes because of skyrocketing insurance and HOA fees.
Coming from Hawaii, we have a thing that we call ohana. Ohana is about family, and that's where City National Bank comes in. They truly understand our business, but they also understand ohana, and no other bank does that.
Oh, that was the end of it anyway. So again, I don't know, interesting take by Mr. Gurley there. I don't know if I necessarily believe it. Again, just because there's an increase in inventory doesn't mean that there's a crash, but I digress. Again, leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'd really love to know what you guys think of everything. And I hope that, I hope that there's some relief for buyers out there. And I don't think that there's going to be a crash. Hopefully mortgage interest rates will help things a little bit, but we'll just have to see how it goes. So I hope that you guys enjoyed the stream today. Sorry about missing last week. I had a few things pop up and wasn't able to go at my normal time. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed the stream. If you did, please like this video, drop a comment. It helps my channel out, helps me out. It doesn't cost anything. You can even subscribe to the channel so that you're alerted from all my future live streams. I typically go live on Wednesdays around 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and we're talking about real estate, the latest real estate news and developments and market updates. If you all have a topic that you want me to discuss, I'd be happy to explore that for you. Drop it in a comment, send me a message on YouTube, and I would be happy to cover it. Thanks again for joining, and have a good rest of your week. I'll see y'all real soon.